Welcome to E Squared Emporium for all things AP Psychology. Today we're going to talk about correlations. What is a correlation? It's a statistic that measures the degree to which two variables move in relation to each other. Why do we use correlations in psychology? Well, we use them for natural observation. We can use them for survey data. We can use them for archival research. Sometimes we start with a correlation and then we need to run an experiment to prove if the correlation has a cause and effect. So the correlation coefficient is a statistical measure of the strength of the relationship between the relative movements of the two variables. Well, what the heck does that mean? It means if one goes up, does the other go up? If one goes down, does the other go down? That's what that means. So here's what we say about a correlation coefficient. When one trait or behavior accompanies another, we say the two correlate. An example, when it's raining outside, we tend to sell more raincoats or more umbrellas, right? Those are two items that may have a correlation between each other. So it's a statistical measurement of the relationship between the two variables. And we measure it by R. R indicates the strength of the relationship. And the plus or the minus indicates the direction of the relationship. Our range is from -1 to +1. And the relationship gets weaker the closer you get to 0. And we're going to see a lot of examples of that if this sounds a little overwhelming right now. So a scatter plot is really just a graphed cluster of dots. It may or may not show any relationship. This one right here shows no correlation. It's just a scatter. I don't see an upward or a downward direction. But when we looked at two variables, this is what we got. And it could show a possible correlation. This one's pretty much showing a 0, 0 of nothing. But if it was to show a high number, it would mean they were more correlated. So here's another example. This is the height and the temperament of 20 men. So does height have anything to do with your temperament or your personality? Well, there's a slight upward trend there. It's a little random, but there's a slight upward trend. If we look there, we sort of see it, but I don't know that I would really call it a really high correlation there. So yeah, sometimes there's really not any relationship. And what does the R mean? R is a statistic that tells you the strength and the direction of the relationship. So we have a perfect positive correlation, which is +1, and we have a perfect negative correlation, which is -1. So here's an example. The number of hours that you spend studying per week has a correlation to your grades, your scores going up. So it's not a perfect arrow, but you can see that it's generally going up. The other one is the amount of hours of TV that I watch per week seems to also have a correlation to my GPA going down. And again, it's not a perfect arrow going down, but you can see that it seems to have a negative correlation. So when both of the variables are affected in the same way, either both up or both down, we call that a positive correlation. So a decrease in the time spent exercising is a decrease in your fitness level. An increase in your time spent exercising is an increase in your fitness level. So when X increases, Y increases. When X decreases, Y also decreases. Here's an example. The hotter the summer heat temperatures go up, the higher your AC bill, your electric bill is going to be. That's positive. Now, a negative correlation, it doesn't mean that the thing is negative. It just means that the arrow goes down. There are some negative correlations that are actually about some pretty cool positive things. But this just means that they're going in two different directions. So when one variable increases, the other variable decreases. So when X increases, Y decreases, or the opposite. So for instance, when gas goes up, the sale of SUVs and Hummers goes down. The longer that you stay up on the computer at night, the less sleep you get. So that's a negative. So how closely related are the two sets of scores? So in the center, you see the scatter plot where there's no correlation, 0, no relationship. On the top, you see what perfect positive looks like, which is a +1. And on the bottom, you see what perfect negative looks like, which is a -1. Both of them, both perfect positive and perfect negative, have a high correlation. So whether it's positive or negative in terms of correlational studies, if it's closest to +1 or closest to -1, it's a high correlation. So the stronger the relationship, the stronger the number, regardless of whether there's a positive or a negative sign there. That's the thing that sometimes trips students up. So if R is closer to +1 or if R is closer to -1, that means you have a very strong relationship. And the closer it is to 0 from either negative or positive, it means that it's very weak or no association. And if we put it on what we typically think of as a number line, we need to think of it a little bit differently here, but this might help visually show us. So if I start at 0, there's no correlation between two things. But if I move closer and closer to -1, it gets higher, 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 higher in being connected. And if I move closer to +1, it gets higher and higher and higher and higher and higher in having a correlation. Okay, so here it is when we put it all together. So now you can see all of the data together. What do we mean by no correlation and moving towards perfect positive, and no correlation and moving towards perfect negative? So please go on to watch part 2 for your homework for tonight. Thank you.